So let's review steps for adding positive and negative numbers and subtracting them. So you should have these in your notes. Step 1 is whenever you have a subtraction problem, I want you to turn it into addition problem. Subtraction is the same thing as adding a negative number. Then you need to ask yourself, well, do these have the same signs? If so, if they do, you add the numbers and keep the sign. If no, you subtract the numbers and keep the sign of the bigger number. So I have a few examples we're going to work through for you. So you've got -4 plus 6. Well, it's already an addition problem, so we're going to skip to step 2. Do they have the same signs? Well, I see that I have a negative and a positive, so they do not. So I'm going to subtract and keep the sign of the bigger. 6 minus 4 is 2. Is 6 or 4 bigger? Well, 6 is, so it's positive. Now let's look here. 7 minus a -3. Now I don't think that I've given you rules for this, so let's go ahead and mark this down that when you subtract a negative, it simply turns into an addition problem. So if this turns into 7 plus 3, your answer would just be 10. 3 minus 7. Well, step 1 is turned to an addition problem. A subtraction problem is the same thing as adding a negative. So if I were to rewrite this, I could do 3 plus -7. And now I follow my rules. Do they have the same signs? No, they don't, because I've got a positive and a negative number. If not, I do my subtraction. 7 minus 3 equals 4. And then which number is the biggest, 7 or 3? Well, 7's got the bigger absolute value, so I know that I'm going to use that sign, which is negative. 12 minus 14. Again, I'm going to want to turn this to an addition problem. Subtracting is the same thing as adding a negative number. So I'm going to trade that. Now I ask myself, do they have the same signs? Well, I've got a positive and I've got a negative. So the answer is no, they do not. So I subtract. So 14 minus 12 equals 2. And I keep the sign of the greater number, which is that 14. So it's going to be negative. Now let's move up here. -3 minus a -1. Well, if you look down here, subtracting a negative makes an addition problem. So if I rewrote that, I could write it as -3 plus 1. Then I would ask my questions. Do they have the same sign? Well, a negative and a positive. No, they don't. So I subtract. 3 minus 1 equals 2. And is a 3 or a 1 bigger? Well, the 3 is. So I know my answer is a -2. Now I've got -3 plus 6. It's already an addition problem, so I can move to the next step. Do they have the same signs? Well, they don't, because I've got a negative and a positive, so I subtract and keep the sign of the bigger. So 6 minus 3 is 3. However, 6 is bigger than 3, so I know that it's a positive number. Next, let's move to this one, -12 plus 11. So before I use these tricks, I'm going to give you another trick that I like to use. I always think about it in terms of money. If my sister owes me $12 and she only pays back 11, she still owes me $1, doesn't she? Sometimes that helps me when I think about terms in negative and positive is to think about it in money. But let's use the tricks that I've taught you. They do not have the same signs because one's a negative and one's a positive. So I'm going to subtract and take the sign of the bigger number, which is 12, which is that $1 that my sister still owes me. So the last example I'm going to do here, sorry, they're all kind of running together, is -4 minus 7. Well, first step is to turn it to an addition problem. So I'm going to make it -4 plus a -7. Once I do that, and by the way, I just put the parentheses around it to kind of separate it. Those parentheses don't really do anything mathematically. They just separate your thoughts. So now I ask myself, do they have the same signs? Well, they do. So 4 plus 7. And remember, I added because they have the same signs. 4 plus 7 is 11, and I keep the sign. So it's a -11. And if you're thinking of that one in terms of money, If she borrowed $4 and then borrows 7 more, she now owes me a total of $11.